Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping. And the vision, oh, ye caught me in a moment of singing. Yet this is the topic for this video, and we are going to be discoursing on the darkness, the shadow side, shadow work, and many other things. So, hello dearest beautiful souls of love and light. This is Lady Nenari, Princess of the Sea, Lady of Glencoe, Highlands, Scotland, coming to you with a new video. So this moment, I'm going to be speaking about the shadow work and things having to do with dark entities and psychic attacks and things of that nature, because it actually came up in a woman who came to me who was requesting some assistance with her twin soul. She felt there was a dark entity around her and around him and interfering with their union. And I've had many people who've come to me over the years in that respect. So from an earthly perspective, we do have what we call shadow work. However, I'm going to put this in the context of multidimensional realities. So I'm going to have an explanation that comes from source all the way through to the earthly explanation for things, okay? So when your consciousness is free, and it is free from this dimension, you are able to go into multidimensional consciousness and multidimensional realities that are able to be seen and heard and felt and experienced beyond just this reality. Now, many famous prophets and seers and mystics have always had the ability to do this. So we often can't bring a context of that as raising our consciousness, and so we often see dark energies or dark entities as frequencies that vibrate low and that we need to raise our frequency. When we're in multidimensional consciousness, actually, we are just vibrating at different frequencies, just like the different frequencies on a radio dial. In source energy consciousness, in all that is, and in multidimensional realities, there is free from being any such thing as higher or lower, darker or light. There is just an isness. It's all one. So it's like you could meld the light and the dark together in that respect. So another woman who I mentor had come to me and asked the question, why would we look at the dark the same as the light? Because in source energy consciousness, there is no such thing as light or dark, or higher or lower, or left or right, or up or down, or sideways. Okay, there is just an isness. So light and dark are the same in that oneness, that isness. It is only when you come to this earth dimension, now there are some other dimensions that see a sense of separation and duality, but this is the main dimension here, this earthly dimension, in which we have the perception of duality. So that means there is this light and there is this dark. Light is simply just the light of love, it's source energy consciousness, and darkness then is simply the absence of light. So that's the duality perspective from the earthly perspective of consciousness. So when that happens, there are multidimensional realities in which, from this isness, in the vastness of all that is, can include darkness or dark entities or shadow figures and darkness and psychic attacks and all of these things. In the relativity of multidimensional consciousness of all that is, it does exist. However, again, going back to what I said a few moments ago, the only way it can really exist into your dimensional consciousness reality is when you are vibrating in that vibrational frequency of that channel. It would be like understanding that 100.7 exists on the radio dial, 107.5 exists on the radio dial, 98.2 exists on the radio dial. However, you know that it exists unless, though, you are tuned into 98.2 as a channel. You're going to be free from hearing or seeing or experiencing what's on 98.2. Now, again, for the mystics and the seers and people like myself who have this gift, and I came here with these gifts of being able to experience more than one dimension at once, and I will refer to a video that I did on multidimensional timelines and multidimensional consciousness. So I'll leave that in the video description here so that you have an essence to understand that of different timelines, different dimensions of consciousness and what that means. But for the average quote-unquote earthly person who is free from having these gifts or has been free from developing these gifts, most people can only focus on one dimension of consciousness at one time. They may feel or sense other dimensions but not have the totality of that reality. It is only when you tune into that specific channel do you receive what is on that channel. So again, it's free from being about you need to raise your frequency and that dark energies are somehow lower or denser in consciousness. The lower energies, if you will, or the darkness or the shadow energies is just another frequency on the radio dial, just as the light is, and everything in between. Because just like a rainbow, if you want to dial into the purple vibe or the yellow vibe or the orange or the green or the blue or any other shade in between, magenta, teal, any of these colors, you would have to dial into that frequency of that color. It's not necessarily that purple is somehow higher than red. Now, we associate that here from duality perspective when we're talking about the chakra system. But in infinite consciousness and in the multidimensional realms, red is just a frequency. Purple is just a frequency. White is just a frequency. Okay? It's just the vibrational frequency you are attuning to or tuned into. Now, empaths know this very well because empaths, when you're actually an empath, you are a soul frequency tuner. So you actually have the ability to tune your frequency to somebody else's frequency. So you're able to be empathic to understand or breathe life into, take in or breathe in somebody else's consciousness of what they're feeling, they're experiencing, they're emoting, okay? And so it's just a different frequency. Now, how an empath actually is able to work on the higher levels of consciousness without allowing those emotions to be part of them. They can take it in as part of this person, basically embracing them as source energy, because we are all one in that respect. And at the same moment, to be able to not focus that energy so much so that they are absorbed in that channel, they just shift the channel, they shift vibrational frequency. So it's kind of like if you walk into a room and you immediately tune into somebody who sat in the room. You immediately tune into that vibrational frequency and you go over and you say, how's you? And, let me take your hand. Maybe you're there to comfort them. Maybe they had a bad day or whatnot. And then all of a sudden somebody calls your attention. Oh, hi. And you go off after you had been with this person. What did you do? You shifted your channel. You shifted your vibrational frequency. Okay, and the best way for empaths to be able to actually come into a place where they are able to handle the energy stream of others in their emotions when they're coming at them with those emotions is to tune into the source energy channel. and to recirculate that through the body in the toroidal field that we are. And I teach actually how to do this process in my soul mediumship course, so that you are actually utilizing source's energy, which is infinite, rather than your own personal energy. Because most of the time, the reason that empaths feel so drained and they have trouble processing emotions and taking on this energy as if it is theirs is because they're not utilizing the infiniteness of source energy. They're utilizing their own personal energy, which will actually drain you. So when you're utilizing source's energy infinitely, then they can take whatever energy they want. You can be as empathic as you want, and it's source energy that's infinite and is coming through you as you, rather than actually utilizing your own physical energy. So this is something that I teach about in my soul mediumship course on how to do this. So that is the basis of what we're going to be talking about when it comes to dark energies and dark entities. So I want to share with you in this realm that I know very well about interdimensional beings, about shadow beings, about dark entities and whatnot, because I've had personal experience with those who I mentor. I've had personal experience with my own twin soul in this realm. And so this is kind of what I wanted to share with you. And back some years ago, and I'd say it was probably about 7, maybe 8 years ago, when I was living in Canada, and Canada is home for me. Home is also in Scotland now as well. However, when I was living in Canada in BC, where I'm from, my twin soul went through something that's known as a psychic attack. And so this evening in particular, he had actually texted me to say that he was experiencing this psychic attack. Now, part of it could be attributed to, this was during the time that he was still on the drink. He was still drinking. He hadn't, stopped drinking. And he had had a few glasses of wine, but this is not why he experienced the psychic attack. And I'm going to delve into what this is about in just a few moments. But he was with a former girlfriend of his, and who is still a friend. My twin soul Chris was, her name was Leslie. And so he actually rang me up from his cell phone and had me speak to this woman, and she and I had a conversation, and then I also spoke with him, and he was just right freaked out that this dark entity was around him and was psychically attacking him. And when I got on the phone with Leslie, she was just like, right, I have no idea what he's on about. I'm really nervous and concerned for him, and so I walked her through the process of what to do, because I wasn't physically there at that moment, and then I also did a process with him as well when he had come on the phone, but I also instructed her on what to do as well. Now, there was also another time, and I will share with you what I did in that process with him in a few moments. But there was also another time, and this was about a year later, in which it was, late. He and I are both night owls, my twin soul and I, and so he was texting me quite late in the evening. It's probably 1, 2 in the morning, something of that nature. And he was right afraid, because he was perceiving this woman at the airport. Now, mind you, our airport, because it's a small town, our airport was not 24/7. It's a small town outside of where we lived, and so the airport shuts, in the evening. Last flights out is usually about 10 o'clock. It used to anyway. I don't know if it does anymore, but it did at that time. And so this obviously meant that the airport was shut, and so there was no one at the airport, but he swore he saw a woman at the airport that had just landed and that was coming to get him, because he had sat at the shore that day and had meditated and was sending love and light to what we call the elite or corrupt beings on this earth and whatnot, and that he was commiserating with these spiritual beings in high-level dimensional consciousness, and that he felt that he was not doing the proper light work, or that he was putting himself in danger, and that this woman was going to come get him. okay? And he was just right in the thick of it. Now, I also had another personal experience with another gentleman who was and is a near twin of mine, who I had met along this path. I met him probably about 6 years ago. And I was teaching a satsang in the evening at his at this beautiful resort hotel and spa that is in BC, in the town that I live in. And he invited us to come round, and his room is, the rooms there are not just a room, put it this way, it's like, a huge suite, and there's loads of room. And so we had a satsang circle, and we were learning about the sacred art of Tantra from the soulful perspective. And so I was activating this satsang, and we did a soul gazing. And during the soul gazing, he completely freaked out, this bloke, and he asked us all to leave. And it wasn't until a day or two later that he private messaged me and let me know that the reason that he asked us to leave was because he felt he was being psychically attacked. And what actually in essence happened was that my twin soul astral projected or soulfully projected himself into the room, and this is what this bloke had seen. And at that point in time, my twin soul was doing his own shadow work in that respect, and he was in the vibe of jealousy. And so he thought that this other bloke was going to be involved in my life, and there was a possibility of a connection there. But obviously, because he appeared astrally projecting into the room, in essence, this bloke thought he was being psychically attacked. Which, my twin soul, coming from that vibration of jealousy and wanting to say, this is my woman kind of thing, that's how this bloke took it. So I've also had other occurrences happening with something that's known as soul transference, which can happen at times with twin souls and near twins, in which this one bloke in particular, who's a good friend of mine and my twin souls, he started taking on the characteristics, the words, the vibrations of my twin soul. And I felt compelled to take him to this sacred spot that my twin soul and I love to meditate at. And I was wondering why I had felt that way. Well, it was because there was a soul transference going in. Now, I can go into a lot more detail on that, and perhaps I will do that in another video. But I'm sharing this with you to share that I've had experience, in recent years, but for many years I've worked with people who have had haunted houses. I've done spirit clearings, I've done house clearings, room clearings, all that sort. I was involved in, spirit boxes and things having to do with paranormal and that realm over the many years, 35 plus years now, that I've been professionally doing this. So the reason that I'm sharing this with you is to talk in terms of dark entities, because what the essence of a dark entity really is, and this is something that I understood to go back for a moment to that evening when my twin soul was right in the thick of it, totally freaking out, totally scared that he was being psychically attacked, and that there was this negative dark entity that was around him and this woman, in that evening. So the secret behind all seeing and experiencing of entities, these dark entities, these shadow figures, and things of that nature. I also was involved with a woman who I lived with for a time in BC, who would always open the window because she thought she had to let the spirits out. Yeah, that there was dark entities in our flat that we lived in together, and so she would do things of that nature, strange things. But all the secret is in seeing and experiencing entities of that nature, the dark entities. And this woman, as I said, she had said to me as well, that she felt there was a dark entity manipulating their twin soul union, and that things started off fine for them, but then it started to feel different. And for the past week, she was receiving the word manipulation in her mind, and then the last few days, she would feel more than her twin soul's energy. At times, she couldn't reach him or dive into their connection, and she also thought that the entity was watching her, and especially when she was in a tirade over her twin. There was a strong pull in her solar plexus and intense sexual urges as well, and she didn't know what to do about this. So for all of the above, my twin soul's experience of whatnot, what this woman was experiencing, what my twin soul was experiencing in those moments was and is real. Now, if you go back to the beginning of this recording of this video that I shared, in multidimensional consciousness, in all that is, these dark entities exist, right? However, the only way that we can actually bring them into our physical reality is to tune into that vibrational frequency channel of it. So why would you tune into that vibrational frequency channel of it? Because the secret behind all seeing and experiencing of dark entities, shadow figures, evil spirits and things of that nature is there is a fragmented aspect of our soul in this life or other lives of some trauma that has been experienced, or an emotional state that we were utterly deprived of. And this shadow dark side is the inner soul child feeling completely separated, isolated, without his or her needs being met. And it's something that this person desperately wants to experience and create of this experience of what's missing, of the needs being met, and feeling the feeling which is the opposite of isolation, which is connection. Okay, and yet the person doesn't know how to do so, and or believes that they cannot have what it is that they're seeking. So they tune into this channel and create this entity, which is the shadow side. Okay, because they don't know how to create the feelings of being heard, loved, and accepted, and being with people who they are connected with, that can provide that as well as within them and from source. So, with this woman, what she was experiencing of her twin soul was not a dark entity. It was actually the shadow aspect of both herself and him. Both shadows, both of their shadows, both of their dark energies, because both of them, and she said even specifically that she felt that it was watching her, especially when she was in a tirade. Okay, one of the ways that dark entities can come in is through the emotion of anger, through the emotion of hurt, through the emotion of pain. So there was a strong pull in her solar plexus, she said, and that is, of course, because of the intense energy of the shadow. It is her own inner soul child crying for love, and it is her twin soul crying for love. And it was the same thing with my twin soul. When he experienced that psychic attack of that woman, he felt all of those things because he had inner soul child healing work he had not done, he had not embarked upon, and he was still drinking. And when we have any type of addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, sex, work, anything that we're addicted to, is a cover-up for needs that have been free from being met. Okay, and so to avoid the feeling, to avoid living, to avoid being the spiritualness, we seek to dumb ourselves down or numb ourselves out with some form of addiction. So what had happened is that this was his inner soul child that was reaching out and crying out for this love, this attention, this wanting to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to be loved and accepted for who he is. So it's the same thing with this woman and her twin soul. It was both the shadow aspects of her twin soul and herself, and trauma and wounds that had not been healed. And it comes up in this perception of darkness because of that reason. So, how do you come into healing that? So what I did with my twin soul in that evening, during that phone call, and I also did this when the gentleman who was with me thought that he was being psychically attacked by my twin soul. I also did this with my twin soul the night that he was very upset about the fact that this woman from the airport was coming to get him. It's to understand and completely hold that inner soul child. So what I did with him on the phone, and I also instructed this woman to do as well, is to understand that what is happening is real in the moment. So this woman who said she was experiencing this dark entity, in her eyes, it is real in this moment because she is tuned into that dimension. She is tuned into that vibrational frequency and channel, as the same as it was with my twin soul. So when I was on the phone with him, I let him know it's okay, I understand, I'm right here with you. I know that what you're experiencing right now is very real to you in this moment. And I want you to know that I'm here holding your hand. I'm neither going away from you, nor am I judging you, nor am I seeking to fix you or change you, nor am I seeking to invade your space. I'm just here present with you. And he immediately already had started to feel better just by that acknowledgement, because what it did was it let his inner soul child know that, okay, what I'm feeling and I'm experiencing in this moment is real, and I have every right to feel that way. I feel validated, I feel safe, I feel comfortable, I feel loved. Okay, and then from there, I went and did an inner soul child healing process, going deeper with him into that. Now I have a recording of a session that I did of a inner soul child healing that I did both many years ago, and then also one recently, and I merged the two of them together and made it available for both divine feminine and divine masculine, and I'm going to put that recording up in my next video. But for right now, what I did was I helped him, my twin soul, to bring back that essence of the inner soul child with him, to have him feel loved and safe, and that experience that he was so desperately wanting to have his needs met, and that he felt so deprived of in the trauma that he was experiencing right there in that moment, which was triggering trauma from younger trauma that he had in his life back when he was 17, that he had an experience of back when he was married to his ex-wife, and what caused their divorce, back when he was a wee lad as well and not feeling loved and safe and didn't have his needs met, and then also other lives that he experienced. I utilized this life as a proxy and what was happening right there in the moment to actually heal it, and giving him the gift of the experience of what he so desperately needed, which was to feel loved, to feel heard, to feel accepted just as he is. Now, in both instances, once that occurred, and since that time, in the last 7 years since that happened, he's never experienced another dark entity. He has never experienced another psychic attack. Because this is what happens when you actually do the inner soul child healing work. Those frequencies no longer are there. You shift out of those frequencies because you've sat with the emotion, you feel it full out as if you're in the moment, and then you heal it in wholeness, balance, and integration, reintegrating that dark entity within you by loving it, by understanding that it's actually the dark or shadow side within you, and that it is to be healed by bringing forth what it is that you never experienced. So darkness and dark entities and darkness in the mind is all about, separation and revenge and competition and conflict and what's in it for me, destruction, brutality, jealousy, anger, I'm better than you, possession, all of these things, right? And the light, which is the light of love, is that essence of loving yourself, of giving that nurturing and acceptance and feeling heard and safe and loved. And so once that experience happens, then it can then fade. Now I have some energy transmissions or channels related to this, and I will also put this in the video description so that you have it as well. Once you understand that everything is energy, and that basically all you are to do is to cleanse or clear the energy within you, then those dark beings, those shadow beings, the evilness, the psychic vampires, the psychic attacks, they all shift in multidimensional consciousness. So anytime I've actually done a house cleaning or clearing, anytime I've done any work with that type of thing, or entities that appear to be haunting a place and whatnot, and those type of beings usually come because they want to give a message, that they have a message for somebody who's actually there in the house, or a message for all of humanity, or something that they need to complete in getting some sort of a message out. Something completing that this soul needs to complete, and then they move on. Energetic blueprints will always be there around in the multi-dimensions of everything that these energy spots are. Replays of trauma, replays of battles of war, murder, and whatnot. This vibrational frequency will always be there. If you're tuned into that frequency, you'll be able to pick that up. However, if you are able to be in that place where you are fully integrated within you and have called forth in those fragments within you and healed them by experiencing the love and the nurturing and the acceptance that you never received as a wee lad or lass in this life and in other lives, those things will be free from occurring. And if they do, you may just notice them more in just an observation. So like, for instance, in an observation of really experiencing something last summer, summer 2017, when I was at Culloden, because I had a life there, I felt what happened. My ankle was playing up to show me that. But was I so traumatized by it that it crippled me? No, it was more of an observation. And as soon as I left the Culloden battlefield, my ankle was fine, and it's been fine ever since. Okay, so it's something that you would notice in a observation then, as opposed to, fully immersing yourself in it and having fear around it and whatnot. So the shadows and the darkness are there to help us to be able to do the integration work, the calling back of the fragmented pieces of our soul. Now, the soul itself, from the source energy consciousness perspective, our soul is free from being fragmented. Our soul is whole, perfect, complete, and beautiful simply as we are. What appears as the fragments is when we embody in physical earthly consciousness or into other dimensions, that there are pieces then of the soul that also fragment in multidimensional consciousness, and we are to call those pieces back in love to bring wholeness, balance, and integration embodied in this physical body for this particular life, particularly if it's our last life as well. So from the soul perspective, it is said that we collectively believe that somehow we require this contrast or this darkness or this shadow or dark entities to somehow be the light, or to create or to cause expansion within us, or to integrate into wholeness, the wholeness that we already are. well, this kind of is free from making much sense, because if we're already whole, then we really are free from requiring that contrast, that darkness, that shadow to be the light that we are. It's like saying that the sun requires the shadow or the night to be able to shine. It's light. No, it just shines, okay? And we are actually free from needing such. It's an earthly construct in duality. In the oneness, there is none of that. Okay, in this field of duality we're living in, we can embrace and dive deeply into the shadow, and going deeply into the dark of the shadows, so that they're fully observed and transformed from the dark shadow to the light that allowed the shadow to begin with. That's duality consciousness. And so such is wonderful. Yet once you come into the reality of source energy consciousness, to understand wholeness and oneness and embody that, we no longer require to dive deep in the dark shadows to be able to be the light. The sun just shines. It requires no dark shadows. It just shines. So too are we that. Source itself requires no shadow to expand. It requires no contrast to expand. It just infinitely expands. So there's a channel out there, and I'm free from putting that channel down, but there's a channel of a woman who channels some entity that they call source energy consciousness, that says we require contrast to have expansion. And this is free from being true. Again, the sun just shines. Source itself just shines and is this light. And so it is simply infinitely expanding. Source is in spiritation, in inspiration, being in spirit, in source of who it is. And there is delightment in that. It's free from being boring at all. It is exciting, it's juicy, it's delightment, it's joy, it's bliss, and it's ever continuous expansion. Okay, when we were wee lads or lasses playing together, did we sit and have contrasts or shadows or dark entities when playing dolls or house or hide and seek? No, we were just in the delightment of playing and co-creating and awe and magic and wonder and enchantment. And this is how Source is, in that fun. And so this is what Jesus meant when he said to enter the kingdom of heaven is to be childlike. We are to be in that awe and that magic and that wonder, and then we are just infinitely expanding. Because we're infinitely expanding, we require no opposite, okay, in that respect. And this is the consciousness that we're moving towards now, in this shift of consciousness into who we are. And because there are people who get stuck in the fact that they believe that these entities, these dark entities exist. And as I said, in that moment, it feels really real. And to acknowledge that is absolutely imperative. And then to do the deeper inner soul child healing work is what's necessary, because you're free from ever being stuck. It's just you've been committed to vibrational frequencies, thought processes, emotions, programs, patterns, and behaviors from this life and other lives that maybe once had helped you, but no longer do. And so the reason that you're unable to move forward is because you keep using these same old thought processes in a new timeline that is free from working in this new timeline. So you're being invited to change into new ways of vibrating. Change the channel, yeah? Change your vibrational frequency. It's not about raising your frequency, it's about just changing the channel, just like you do on the radio dial. Change your ways of vibrating in vibrational frequency energy, thinking, emoting, feeling, sensing, intuiting, and then you'll see the magic start to occur and the new timelines will emerge, and you can just step into it and you'll be free from having this darkness. So when it comes to smudging and whatnot, energy is just energy. It's neither negative nor positive. It's our judgments and perceptions that turn it into negative or positive. All is energy. And so smudging is absolutely wonderful. There's health benefits for using sage in particular, as it gives negative ions in the air, and it's very cleansing in terms of killing bacteria and things of that nature. So it's wonderful from that perspective. But what you're really doing when you're saging and clearing a energy field or clearing a physical space or a physical home or some place on this earth is you're actually cleansing your perception and changing your perception to a new vibrational frequency. So this, along with doing the deeper inner soul child healing work, will be then how you actually then no longer have dark entities. Okay? And so for this woman who was experiencing this with her twin soul, I invite her to sit with the emotions until you're okay with just sitting with the emotion as it is, in loving and embracing and bringing forth the opposite of what it is that you're experiencing. So if you're experiencing fear, bringing about acceptance and bringing about calmness and centeredness and love. Just like Buddha sat with inviting it to tea. So Mara was the shadow side or the dark side or the illusion side that came round even after he achieved enlightenment. And so one of his devotees came at one time and said, "Oh, do you know Mara's here? Should I tell Mara to go away?" And Buddha then said, "No, invite Mara to tea." So invite your emotions to tea. Invite that dark entity to tea. Ask it what it needs. What does it need in that moment? Chances are it just needs acceptance and love and nurturing and its needs being met. And in that, it then vanishes. It's very similar to her, and I've shared this in a video, which I will leave the link for that in the video description. It's about Jessica and the wolf, and I share the story about Jessica and the wolf in that video. And so I would invite you to embrace that and watch that, because that will definitely help you in the inner soul child healing process. Because once we've come into that place of healing, where we fully integrated and loved our inner soul child, we know that we've healed something when it no longer triggers us, when it no longer brings us emotions, an emotional charge, if you will. Now, there may be infinite layers of trauma and wounds that may come up still. However, you have the tools to be able to heal it, and it no longer triggers you to the point of debilitating you. Again, it's more like you see it as an observer in that respect. You also know that you've healed it when you're doing what I'm doing here. I am sharing this with you to help you to heal. Now, I had an experience, and I won't share all the details with you, but to close this out, I will share with you how I healed some trauma and wounds that came up again. Once I was a wee lass, my mum was very abusive towards me, physically and in many ways. She used to wash my mouth out with a bar of soap and sticking it down my throat and having me gagged. She would beat me with whatever was handy, and she had me get a branch from the tree and beat me with that, a shoe, a belt, what have you. And I was severely beaten as a child. I was also locked in my room for 14 hours a night or so if I looked at my mum the wrong way. And I was not given any food, and not given any water, not given any use of the loo, was alone and isolated until the next day for school. And she locked my bedroom door. She would often, we didn't have locks on our doors, so she would take a rope or pantyhose or stockings of some sort and whatnot, and tie it to another door so that I could not open it. And so this came about 5 years ago. I went through a similar situation in which I was forced into isolation in a situation where I was locked in a room. And it occurred for 2 months. and I was allowed out for certain times but had to go back in. And so it brought up that trauma for me again, but I was actually able to heal it. Although I did go through the emotions and whatnot, I was able to heal it on a different level by nurturing my inner soul child, by doing the inner soul child healing work, and then also doing it on behalf of my ancestors as well, because this was a mutated DNA that needed to be transformed into the RNA, or the soul essence. So one of the ways I did that was accept that it was real for me in this moment, that this was a repeat of what happened in my childhood. Even though it was different circumstances, the result was the same. Okay, and these people were doing similar to me that my mum did to me, and unjustifiably as well. I had done nothing illegal or wrong, and was being harmed in this way, and psychologically tortured and whatnot. And it was through being able to handle that, being psychically attacked or psychologically attacked by these people, knowing that this was real in the moment, acknowledging it, and then loving my inner soul child into healing, calling back those fragments. And if it were not for my ability to do that and to be so grounded spiritually, I would have never made it through that horrible situation. Okay, so I do know about dark entities and beings on this earth as well who cause harm to others. I was also raped when I was 15. I utilized the inner soul child healing process years later to go back and heal that. So I know that it works not only in my own life, but it works with others that I have helped. And so this is my gift to you, and in the next video I will share with you this inner soul child healing trauma session that will help you in guiding you in my being there for you to be able to transform this into the healing love and light that you are, so that you can be in that wholeness, balance, integration that you are as a beautiful soul. I love you, beautiful soul. I appreciate you. Thank you for spending this time with me. And may this wisdom bless you in love always, in all ways. Espavo.